News of a new hire for Washington broke on Friday. Adam Peters, former assistant general manager of the San Francisco 49ers, is the new Commanders general manager. What it means, what the ripple effects are right now on this episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. And you can text directly with me about all of the things going on with the Washington Commanders. I've been spending most of my morning texting with insiders. A lot of excitement coming from the hiring of Adam Peters as the new Washington Commanders general manager. Again, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to get in on all that fun. I'm David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderCountry.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation. And I'm your host here every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers and everydayers. I appreciate you for coming through on every episode, not just this episode, but I know that you're here for this one as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code Locked On to get $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode, we are deep diving into the potential ripple effects of Washington's first big hire of the offseason that includes players, executives, and the coaching search that is already underway, but is now going to get incredibly ramped up. And that's where we're going to start, because the big news of the day, in case you haven't heard already, Washington Commanders hired Adam Peters, former San Francisco 49ers assistant general manager, to be the new GM of this franchise. He has been our number one target the entire time we've been talking about this GM search, number one target on a lot of people's lists, number one target on a lot of NFL lists who need general managers to run their teams. In fact, it was expected that the 49ers were going to try to make a big push to keep Adam Peters because that's how valued he is within the organization, by and large considered to basically be the next hot GM in the NFL. Of course, hype doesn't always guarantee production, right? So we'll have to see how things actually unfold. But big news, getting one of the best names in the league. We've been talking this week every day, as you already know, about how attractive this job is in Washington, and the fact that Adam Peters decided to come to Washington instead of potentially take on an increased role in San Francisco, completely just shut out some other teams that had openings and said, I'm not even going to sit down with you. This is my focus. That tells you can listen to everything that I said, but if you don't believe a word that I said, this tells you right now, the fact that Adam Peters wanted this job, dedicated to this job, did not take other interviews, that tells you what this job meant to a guy like him, a guy who had all the options in the world. He is your new top executive for the Washington Commanders. That news broke by Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter, those national guys, but later on confirmed by my friend, your friend, JP Finley of NBC Sports. And something that's interesting about this hire from a Washington Commanders standpoint is that the hiring is general manager. It is not head of football operations. That was the interview tag. They were interviewing for head of football operations. That was the term being used by Josh Harris. But our understanding right now, and of course, things are continuing to develop, but as of right now, it does seem firm that the hiring is for the position of general manager, which leads to a little bit of a different dynamic on what we're going to look at. So we're going to look at what those ripple effects are, obviously, but we're also going to look at the impacts of the coaching search that, again, is already kind of underway with some virtual interviews happening, but will certainly get ramped up even quicker now that Adam Peters is going to be in place once he is official in town. I'm expecting to be in Ashburn Saturday, maybe Sunday, for a press conference to meet Adam Peters and kind of get his insight. So definitely, insiders, you'll be in the know when that information is passed down to me. But for right now, I actually want to bring in Brian Peacock of Locked On 49ers to get his take on what the loss of Adam Peters means and how that impacts the Washington Commanders.
A new general manager in Washington, and it is Adam Peters, the 49ers' former assistant general manager. What is Washington getting in Adam Peters? Hey, everybody, I am Brian Peacock, host of Locked On 49ers, and I think this is a home run hire for the Washington Commanders in Adam Peters, a well-respected man in and out of the building, a popular man by other teams requesting to interview over the past multiple seasons. And it reflects extremely well on the Washington Commanders that their organization is the one that Adam Peters finally said, you know what, I want to take this job. He's turned down past GM jobs because they weren't the right opportunity. And he believes that Washington is the right opportunity with new ownership and a new vision and soon to be a new franchise quarterback that Adam Peters will have to select at number 2 overall. On one hand, what does Adam Peters bring? The blueprint he brings from the San Francisco 49ers? Well, it's kind of difficult to bring that blueprint because you wouldn't say, hey, let's light multiple first-round picks on fire and then be historically great on day 3 and draft superstars and draft starting quarterbacks on day 3 of the NFL draft. But when you look at how those drafts went down, well, when does the scouting department really shine? Well, it's those late picks when Adam Peters guys take over and it's all the scouting and all of the area scouts that he was overseeing come together and make some of those picks that turned out to be the greatest ones for the San Francisco 49ers, the George Kittles and the Brock Purdy's. It's been an unbelievable run of late round picks. And so that's why I think Adam Peters is a home run hire. He's going to be the decision maker, making the call on the early picks and the late round picks now. And he is the number 1 voice in a front office. And I can't wait to see how that works out for Washington. I think it's going to go very well. And look, John Lynch handpicked Adam Peters because Adam Peters came up in scouting with championship organizations. He's got championship pedigree. He started with the championship Patriots organization, then won a title as a scout with the Denver Broncos. And that's where John Lynch saw Adam Peters and handpicked him to be his right-hand man in the front office with the San Francisco 49ers when he took the GM job in 2017. So you've got pedigree, a well-respected guy, and I think the Washington Commanders are doing it right by hiring Adam Peters as their new GM.
All right. Big hat tip to Brian Peacock of Locked On 49ers. A lot of great stuff there. And yeah, guys, just a lot of reasons to get excited for this hire in the direction that the Washington Commanders are headed in. But the next big hire that we expect to come down is going to be who the next head coach is. And from there, we'll be able to dive even deeper into schematics and all these other things and things that are going to impact the product on the field. When you look at this, so hat tip to Brian Peacock there. I'm going to give another hat tip to Tim Kelly of CommanderCountry.com, part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation, one of the writers on the site that I write for as well, where I cover the Commanders. He actually went and did a little bit of a deep dive on some coaching candidates that are attached to both Adam Peters and Ian Cunningham, who is the other finalist for the Washington Commanders GM job. And here are the coaches that he came up with and some of the connections that he made. And really, we're looking at the most direct connections to Adam Peters. And I think right off the bat, you got to talk about Houston Texans offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, a young name, an up-and-comer, certainly served in various roles on the 49ers coaching staff over the years before becoming the Houston Texans offensive coordinator this last season. He was a passing game coordinator from 2017 to 2022 in San Francisco, and certainly they had a lot of good experience there. Picking the hot offensive coordinator doesn't always work out, but Slowick is certainly that name to look for. And after what he did with C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, certainly a lot of people are going to be impressed with his resume. Not a big fan typically of one-and-done guys who get 1 year as offensive coordinator, then move to head coach. But if Adam Peters, who knows Slowick from more than just 1 year, gives the sign-off on that, certainly could see Slowick's name rise up the list of candidates. Mike LaFleur, offensive coordinator in Los Angeles Rams, for the Los Angeles Rams, was the passing game coordinator in San Francisco from 2017 to 2020. LaFleur was a big part of the unsuccessful development of number 2 overall pick Zach Wilson, which certainly hurt his resume moving forward. But the New York Jets had arguably the worst roster in the NFL at the time as well. So some of that could be kind of just destined to fail in any way. But LaFleur obviously is working with Sean McVay. Sean McVay is considered one of the great minds of the NFL right now. He's worked with Kyle Shanahan, so he's got a lot of really good influences to lead him. And honestly, that experience of having a bust quarterback could actually help you prevent you from overreach on a potential quarterback, as a lot of people will expect that to be the pick at number 2. Finally, Steve Wilks, defensive coordinator, San Francisco 49ers, worked together with the 49ers in 2023 this season. Wilks has had a long history of coaching. He's going to be kind of considered that retread. He's 54 years old, but certainly I think Wilks is probably going to get another job in the NFL someday as a head coach. I don't know if it'll be here, but certainly a connection to look out for. If I'm ranking those 3 connections, I'm actually going in that order. I think Slowick is the top one, LaFleur would be second, and then Wilks would be third. Of course, you've also got a connection between Peters and Mike Vrabel, the former Titans coach, who's now a free agent from their time in New England together. Though I'm on the record still, I'm staying on the Mike McDonald train. I know the Ben Johnson train is gaining a lot of steam, but I'm staying on the Mike McDonald train. Wouldn't hate Ben Johnson by any means. Peters has had a lot of success with Shanahan, so an offensive head coach certainly makes a lot of sense there. But he's also worked in Denver, where they won a Super Bowl with the defense. It was an offensive head coach, but a defensive win for the Super Bowl. And then obviously coming from New England, Bill Belichick, one of the greatest defensive minds in NFL history. But that's so a little bit of ties to coaching searches. Now, obviously, he's going to get more involved with these coaching searches as it continues to ramp up. But on the executive level, what's the impact on Martin Mayhew and what could be coming for the front office after this? That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event, and Game Time is the fast and easy way for you to buy those tickets to all your sports, music, comedy, even theater events near you. They got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They got last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, all kinds of deals for you to take advantage of with easy-to-find and buy tickets in your area, and you get to see your seat in the venue before you agree to the purchase, which just gives you a little bit more peace of mind so you know what you're getting yourself into. Their all-in prices show you the total up front, so you know the price that you're getting into as well before you hit checkout, and you can buy your tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Game Time even has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after some of them start. It's the place for you to find last-minute tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create your account, use the code Locked On for $20 off. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Continuing on with this Adam Peters hiring reaction episode of Locked On Commanders, looking at the ripple effects continuing on. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listener, your first view today and every day, everydayers. Appreciate you coming through for all of the activity happening. I was planning on doing a wildcard weekend preview episode, but we got a lot to talk about with Adam Peters officially being brought on board with the Washington Commanders. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports here for you today. 24/7 covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So we talked a little bit about the coaching ramifications, who Adam Peters is specifically, and why there's so much excitement around him being brought in. But now let's take a look at the front office as well, specifically looking at Martin Mayhew and now what this means for him. Now, on the surface, obviously Martin Mayhew is the serving general manager for the Washington Commanders. So Adam Peters hiring would indicate to you that Martin Mayhew is probably going to be on his way out. And if I had to put odds on it, I would probably say that's the most likely outcome here, is that Martin Mayhew is let go, thanked for his service and all that stuff, and given the opportunity to go find employment elsewhere. And certainly Martin Mayhew is a guy, he's been around, he's been in a few front offices, he's got a good reputation. So I think he certainly could find a job elsewhere, but it's also possible that he sticks around. And obviously they're not going to do a co-GM thing. So he's not going to keep the general manager title if he does stay on. But he and Adam Peters do have a relationship. They were both in San Francisco from 2017 to 2020. At that time, Martin Mayhew was the vice president of player personnel. And now the interesting thing here is the use of labels, right? The use of titles. And again, if the reports, and this is coming from our buddy Chick Hernandez at WUSA 9, fellow Tegna person, and he was kind of the first one to really reach out and confirm that the Adam Peters hiring is under the general manager tag, even though the interview process was for the head of football operations tag. So Martin Mayhew, he's certainly not going to take an assistant GM role. I don't think he's going to want to go that route. I think he'd probably rather go seek out either a GM position or another player personnel executive title, something like that. But this isn't necessarily a done deal. You know what I mean? And during the course of conversations, if Adam Peters wants to retain Martin Mayhew and convinces Josh Harris and Bob Myers and Rick Spielman that that's the right way to go, then perhaps you do see Adam Peters take that, president of football operations or head of football operations title / GM, the way that John Lynch does in San Francisco. And then maybe Martin Mayhew is kept as a vice president of player personnel and in that type of a role. So, I wouldn't necessarily consider Martin Mayhew's time in Washington kind of dead in the water. Of course, that news could come out at any moment as well, especially once the ink is dry on Adam Peters' contract, but I would lean that Martin Mayhew's probably on his way out. If he is, I've had a lot of good interactions with Martin and certainly wish him all the best, moving forward. But there is a connection there between the two men. So if Adam Peters really values Martin Mayhew and wants to keep him on his staff, then there is certainly a possibility. I think that is part of what happens here. Now, we had a question on YouTube on Thursday that came from Nick, and it's kind of expired now, but it actually still brings up a really good talking point that I want to discuss on this episode. Nick wrote, "Hi, David. Good afternoon. How likely do you think it is that we can get Peters, Adam Peters, who the Washington Bears are hiring, and Cunningham, who's Ian Cunningham from the Chicago Bears, in here taking over the president of football operations role and Cunningham taking the GM role? They were just announced as two finalists. Also, if that combo is brought in, who do you think our new head coach target is?" So we already talked about some of the potential head coach targets. I still think your usual suspects, Mike McDonald, Ben Johnson, are kind of your top two. And then after that, you've got, your Frank Smiths of the Miami Dolphins potentially, and some others that they've already conducted interviews with virtually. But I think it's Mike McDonald and Ben Johnson are your top two targets at this point in time. And we'll see which one of them gets or takes the job in that case. Now, obviously, with Adam Peters taking the GM title and role, that kind of eliminates Ian Cunningham as an assistant GM. He's already the assistant GM in Chicago. He's a pretty highly sought after executive himself. You know what I mean? I think he's going to get other offers and potentially take those offers. Now, don't get me wrong. If Ian Cunningham was willing to take a lateral job and go from assistant GM in Chicago to assistant GM in Washington, we'd be more than happy to have him, I'm sure. But I just feel like he's valuable enough and targeted enough that he's going to get a GM offer somewhere else and probably become a GM elsewhere. But that doesn't mean that the Washington Commanders won't necessarily bring on an assistant GM. And again, I don't believe that Martin Mayhew, and this is just my logical thinking. Like I haven't had discussions with Martin Mayhew to make me say that I don't think Martin Mayhew would accept an assistant GM role under Peters with the Washington Commanders. Just the natural kind of progression thing. You don't want to go from a vice president of player personnel to a general manager to an assistant GM. That's working the backwards direction. Usually you want to move forward, not backwards. But if Adam Peters does bring in an assistant GM, there are two names that I think are worth at least discussing. One that I think has a real chance and one that I think has a lesser chance. But the San Francisco 49ers did send Tariq Ahmad and Josh Williams to the NFL's front office and general manager accelerator program during the December league meetings in Dallas, Texas. And that program is designed by the NFL. You send young executives there, and they basically get some mentoring, some lessons, some classes, some practical exercises to help kind of boost their career. Eric Stokes went there for the Washington Commanders, so he was a part of that program as well. And I think Tariq Ahmad is really the most interesting here. So we'll get to him in a second. But Josh Williams, he's a national scout with the San Francisco 49ers right now. He's in his 12th season with the organization. So, I think he's more of a candidate to move up to like an assistant director of college scouting or a similar role, or even director of college scouting if he's super high speed and just kind of leapfrogs a position or two here and there. But I don't think going from national scout to assistant GM is very realistic. So I think Williams is more likely to be an internal promotion by the 49ers, whereas Tariq Ahmad, who also went to the program, he's in his third season as San Francisco's director of college scouting. Previous stop, he was working with Rutgers, and obviously he's been working with Adam Peters. He's worked with John Lynch. So if Adam Peters and Tariq Ahmad have a good relationship, and if Adam Peters trusts Ahmad, then certainly you could see Tariq Ahmad hired over from the 49ers to be Adam Peters' assistant GM. Of course, that's assuming that the Niners don't make him an offer to do the same thing and kind of keep him in-house there. But director of college scouting to assistant GM, that's more of a likely pathway for an executive. So, of course, that's not the only place that things could be changing. The roster for Washington Commanders between last season and this next season is going to be completely different. And we know the guys love to bring their guys along. So let's dive into the 49ers roster and take a look at some guys who could become Washington Commanders this offseason and join Adam Peters in the nation's capital. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Jace Medical and the Jace Case. I know that we come to sports to escape some of the craziness of real life, but sometimes we do have to keep one foot in reality while we talk about our football interests. According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of key antibiotics right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. And that can be a little bit scary. If you need medicine, if you want medicine, you do need to be able to have access to that medicine. And that is where the Jace Case comes in, because now more than ever, it is important for you to be prepared so you don't end up with that hopeless feeling or helpless feeling or at the mercy of supply shortages or anything like that. The Jays case has a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, and many others, because anything can happen and you want to be prepared. Visit jacemedical.com, complete your physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board certified physician, and then your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. Again, it's never been more important for you to be prepared. And if you want to take control of your preparedness, do so at jacemedical.com. Use the offer code locked on to get $20 off your first order. Wrapping up this episode of Locked On Commanders, taking a look at the hiring of Adam Peters, your new Washington Commanders general manager, former San Francisco 49ers assistant general manager, coming over from the West Coast to the East Coast. And that's no small move, guys. Like I told you, like Brian Peacock told you, this is a guy who's had offers, he's had opportunities, he's had other interview requests just this offseason and potential opportunities to take a head job. And he's turned a lot of them down. Choosing to take this one is a huge compliment to the Washington Commanders. And I will tell you, no uncertain terms, the fan base is part of that. You guys are part of that. Everybody saw the excitement you guys had and are harboring for this team. You just need the excuse to go out there and let loose on it. So that certainly is a part of it as well. We also know that people like to come and they like to bring guys that they know. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of things. If you were starting up a business, if you had the opportunity to bring in some people that you know and trust, you would do that as well. And that's basically how GMs and head coaches kind of view this thing. So from a GM standpoint, looking at some San Francisco 49er players with expiring contracts at the end of the season that could potentially become Washington Commanders. And we got to get the first name out of the way because you know it's coming. Defensive end Chase Young. Chase Young, drafted number 2 overall back in 2020 by the Washington Commanders. Not the Washington Commanders at the time, of course, but by the Washington Commanders. Didn't pan out for a numerous amount of reasons in Washington, ended up getting traded to the 49ers for a 3rd round pick, which is a compensatory pick. Interestingly enough, Adam Peters will now get to spend that pick after trading for the player, helping trade for the player as well. And I'm sure that if the 49ers win the Super Bowl, they will hook him up with a Super Bowl ring, that being Adam Peters, even though he won't be there to celebrate the win with them. Look, Chase turns 25 in April, and this has already been brought up by a few people. The potential of Chase Young returning to Washington. Look, Chase is from the area, obviously. Certainly, embrace the fans and all that stuff and the role that he had here. I would be very surprised if Chase Young wanted to come back to the Commanders, not to the DMV, not to Washington, not the fans. I would be surprised if he wanted to come back to the Commanders. Now, at the same time, the people who are here and the people who are there or were here with Chase and the people who are going to be here now are different. That could have a role in it. And I don't know what Adam Peters' experiences are with Chase. I don't know what Chase's, total mindset and presence has been with the San Francisco 49ers. So look, never say never. I would just be very surprised to see it happen. But I wouldn't be upset to see Chase back in the locker room next year. That would be wild to have Chase Young back on this roster and a 3rd round pick that you got for trading him to San Francisco in the first place. But hey, man, anything can happen, right? So that is a name to watch, obviously. Again, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not saying it won't happen. It can never happen, but I would be just very surprised. Quarterback Sam Darnold. When you look at the quarterback situation in Washington, obviously you have Sam Howell still under contract. He's the only guy that's going to be under contract, barring any type of extensions. The expectation is that they're going to draft a young quarterback, but you need more than 2 quarterbacks in your stable. So why not bring in another veteran? Sam Darnold, obviously, is a known commodity to Adam Peters. He's been praised and really all of his stops, not necessarily for his play, but for his presence, for his, teammate ability and all those things. Certainly has gone through the ringer. Certainly has probably grown through all those, had some good success with his limited opportunities in San Francisco. I don't think that's necessarily a decision that Adam makes himself, but certainly some knowledge there. So if whoever the coaching hire is, if they don't know Sam, they could get some insight into him from Adam there. 6-year vet, turns 27 in June. Defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw, 1st round pick in 2020. Just like Chase Young, turns 27 in October, so he's a little bit older. Has only had 6 starts this season. No 5th-year option picked up for Javon, so I think that the expectation is he will move on from the San Francisco 49ers, and he'll be looking for a new home. Again, these are going to have more of an impact when you talk about coaching standpoint, but again, if anybody knows Javon from a personality standpoint and a worker standpoint and a teammate standpoint, Adam is going to be the guy in this organization who knows him the best. So if Adam gives him a sign of or signs off on him from that aspect, then certainly could see him get his second opportunity here in Washington. Some other role player guys, linebacker Oren Burks, mostly has been a special teams guy, but he could come over looking for a chance to climb the depth chart. The 49ers linebacker depth chart is pretty steep. Oren turns 29 in March, so his time is kind of running out if he's going to grab a starting job somewhere. He's also from Alexandria, Virginia, so interesting local ties there. 5 starts this season, replacing some injured 49ers player. Currently is listed on the 49ers depth chart as a starter for the postseason. We'll see if he can get some play time in the divisional round when the 49ers take the field. A couple of other depth guys, defensive tackle Kevin Givens, basically in the same situation. He turns 27 in March. He appeared in 17 games this season, not a starter, but certainly a solid role player his entire career. I think he spent his entire time in San Francisco, shares an agent with Washington Commanders practice squad offensive tackle Alex Akinbulu. Offensive guard Ben Barch, pretty much in the same situation as Givens. He turns 26 in July, would be a solid depth piece potentially brought in. And again, depending on who the coaching staff is, all that stuff. But if these are good character guys that have good reputations for locker room, good reputations for being team players and workers, then Adam Peters certainly could give them his blessing, his personal stamp of approval, and that could lead to them joining your Washington Commanders this off season. So that is our initial deep dive into Adam Peters. Again, I'm expecting to be in Ashburn probably Saturday or Sunday for an introductory press conference with your new general manager. We will have a new episode coming up on Monday. We'll have more mailbags. So frankly, I mean, this is just the start. We've got a whole lot of things to talk about. So insiders, you already know we've got an insider mailbag command huddle coming on Saturday. So get your questions in for that if you want to get in on that, or just text me about all the things happening with the Washington Commanders. Join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders is where you go to do it. If you got questions or comments, throw them down in the YouTube comment section. Text me directly as a Locked Insider. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listener, your first view today and every day. Everydayers, thank you as always for coming through. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to all of that. Thank you so much for making me a part of your day, part of your football routine. Enjoy the off-season win. Until we speak again, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.